On the other side of toxic Christianity, I found myself faced with one question. Now what? This podcast is about that question. We have conversations with folks who are asking themselves the same things. We're picking up the pieces of a fractured and fragmented faith. We're finding treasure in what the church called trash, beauty and solidarity in people and places we were told to fear, reject, and dismiss. I'm Tamice Spencer Helms, and this is Life After 11. What's up, everybody? Welcome back to this episode of Life After 11. I'm your host, Tamice Spencer Helms, and I'm joined by my dear friend, Rochelle. And I'm going to have Rochelle introduce herself to you, and then we're going to jump into today's topic. I'm super excited. So, Rochelle, tell the people who you are, where you're from, what you do.
Yeah, hi everybody. Tamice, thank you so much for having me. This is so much fun. So I'm excited. So I currently live in what is on a modern map, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. It's the land of the Haudenosaunee, Iroquois, and Lenape people. And I work as a musician. So that means I am an educator, I'm a performer. I play with different groups in my city and in the greater area, and I teach from 4 years old to college level. So I see quite a gamut of students there.
Yes. And you completely undersell yourself, because I remember when we celebrated Advent this year, you played something for us that was so incredibly powerful. So I'm hoping that people find you and find what you do, because you're extremely talented, and I just love hearing from you on not just on music, but on what we're going to talk about today. And so I'm super excited. But I'm really excited to have you. And as you know, this first season is all about me introducing people to my beloved community, the people that I'm doing life and faith and journeying along with when it comes to what you would consider church. This is the family brunch crew that I'm introducing everybody to, because the book ends with this idea that we can land in community, that God can set the lonely in family. And so what I love about talking to you is that we have so many things in common and have very similar experiences in evangelicalism. So what I'm going to ask you is kind of, when you think about leaven, and leaven in this context is used to refer to toxic Christianity, toxic religion. It could be anything from whiteness to patriarchy, racism. What was life like for you before and after leaven as you experienced evangelicalism? Did you come into it knowing that there was toxicity there, or was there a moment that kind of woke you up to that and then you had to kind of unravel and deconstruct? Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I was steeped in it my whole life. And what I kind of think is the interesting thing about my faith story in my life is that I was always in multiple different faith spaces at the same time. So like as a kid, we went to an evangelical church, but a whole side of my family was conservative Mennonite, and I actually went to a Mennonite school from kindergarten through 8th grade. So it was very interesting having, like, I couldn't have labeled it as a child, but like looking back going, oh my goodness, yeah. And then the other side of my family was Catholic, so like a real mix of things going on there. And then college, definitely kept following evangelicalism because that's what I knew. And but I went to a Catholic university, which, fun fact, didn't actually know it was Catholic till I moved in. Like, did not figure that out.
You didn't know it was a Catholic?
No, I mean, I knew that they said that they were Catholic, and I just thought like that meant like that's who founded them. Like, I had no idea that like I was gonna have nuns and priests for like core classes. It was. And yeah. And by the way, I loved my college so much. Yeah. Like I adored it. I'm still deeply connected with my professors there and everything. So yeah. So yeah, and then kept going, and then kind of in my late 20s, just a couple years ago, less than a decade ago, just was going through some real personal stuff, and through that, and through friends being like, hey, and you should come to this place, like found charismaticism, and the ride that is, and that was what I would say was my last stop before like turning around on the road, you
Gotcha.
know.
So
Um,
was there like an event or like
so for me it was slow. It
okay.
was it was slow. It was gradual. It was getting to know people, people who are still in our brunch community, and talking with them, having conversations with them, starting to understand um, uh, the ongoing story of racism in America and whiteness and all that. And then the final card for me really was the Sunday before the 2020 election, sitting in church, and I could, I, like, I'm sure I heard this multiple election years, but for whatever reason, I was just like, I cannot believe I'm hearing this. Like, it was as though I was hearing it for the first time, where someone was with the thinnest of veils endorsing Donald Trump as God's chosen candidate. You know what I mean? And saying that that was the Christian side, that if you were a Christian, you were voting that side. Now, I can look back and say, there, absolutely, I heard that my whole life.
Right.
But in that moment, with everything that had been happening in the nation, with everything that had been happening in the world, and everything that I was learning through friends of mine, through literally just hearing and choosing to believe their stories, I just was like, I can't do this anymore. Like, I cannot do this. I cannot sit there and and bow down to the exclusivity of things that Christ never talked about, you
Mhm.
know?
Woo.
Yeah. And I don't know how, it was very quickly after that I found the inverse community.
Mm.
I mean, I'm sure, like, looking back again, I'm sure that, like, cosmically, and the Lord definitely was aligning all those events for me. But in my mind, and even how I feel about it now, looking back, I'm like, oh yeah, I guess that was all within a month of one of each other. But I
Yeah.
had, but I didn't really, um, but I have to, like, it doesn't feel that way in my mind. It feels
Right.
like these, like, separate events, you
Right.
know? Yeah, yeah.
In hindsight, you look and you see sort of this random kind of order to,
Yes.
and that can be really kind of jolting. So
Yeah.
like take me back, you're sitting in church, like kind of
Yeah.
what's the feeling? Like what's the feeling you hear that? Did you have a visceral, was it a visceral
Oh,
feeling or
yeah. It was, I actually remember like texting other people in my row who I knew were outraged as well. But I was having what I can only describe as a trauma response, in that I was like, I, like, after they said it, or after it was gone and people were going, I literally can't even remember what I heard afterwards, because I was like, I am having this experience where everything is very loud and I can't hear a single word anyone is saying. Like, I cannot process language in this moment, and I just want to weep, and but I can't run, I can't move. I'm feeling frozen, and I'm feeling like, I mean, gut punch, I guess, but it felt so much bigger than that. It felt like a whole, like, felt like a car wreck, just felt like you got, you know, just slammed into a wall. And that was certainly not the beginning of the end, but I think that was the end of me being like, I can't do this.
Mhm.
I can't do this. I gotta find something else. I just, and I, like, what I can say in all of it is that, like, I think in all of those spaces, which I would guess is a similar story for all of us, like, we were just trying to find more of Jesus.
Right.
Everywhere we went, we're just like, I had this glimpse. I want more of him. And then you're fed a whole lot of culture, a whole lot of toxicity, and a whole lot of stuff you don't even have labels for because they're certainly not calling out their own, issues. I mean, yeah. So, and it can be, if you don't know what you're looking at for the first time, it can feel slow because it can feel hidden. But once you can name it, it's like this is everywhere.
Yeah.
There's no denying this. So
Yeah, and I think that's such a beautiful way to describe and why I use this concept of leaven, because you really don't know it's there until you start realizing like, hey, I mean, I can kind of equate it to right now I'm learning about my own food intolerance, right? And how I actually have gluten intolerance. And
yeah.
so my body flares up and I have like really, really bad arthritis and back pain and knee pain whenever I have gluten. But I honestly didn't stop eating gluten until like a year and a half ago. And it's so interesting now because I'm like, so if I eat something with it now, immediately I feel it. And I'm like, I can't believe that this is how my body felt. And I thought that this was normal, that my body was just in pain and miserable all the time. And I just thought that's how my body felt until I removed this thing. And now I'm realizing, oh my gosh, like, and now when I taste it or I ingest it, it's very clearly there. Do you feel like for you, as you've kind of like removed yourself from this, what are some of the things that kind of alert you to that leaven of toxicity, like in faith? Are there things that come up, especially because you did worship? Like what kinds of things for you are kind of alerts now to stay away from?
So I think for I think alerts for me immediately are like, uh, is every pastor a straight white dude? Honestly, that's like a real quick alert for me because I mean, me going like, hey, even if that was, I mean, okay, assuming the best of intentions, even if that just was unintentional, you weren't trying to not make it happen. Actually, like, I remember my mom when we were kids, and we would always say, like, oh, we messed up something or broke something or whatever, and we'd be like, I didn't try to. And she'd always be like, you didn't try not to,
Right.
and I feel like that so applies here. So that's a big part of it for me immediately, like going into any space being like, who is this person? And especially in the day of, meet like social media, like it's pretty easy to find out like where people are in their lines.
It is true.
Um yeah, any space that is really homogenous is out for me. I don't want it. I don't want to do it. I spent my whole life there, and I don't mean that in some like grand way. I just mean that in like, I want to hear from people whose life experiences are not mine, because I think when whenever anybody has something that's different from you, there's a whole lot more to learn there than from someone who's been through all the same stuff you have. Um, so that other things, um, I'm at a place right now where even format matters a whole lot to me.
Okay.
Like, because I did worship,
Yeah.
it's very hard for me to go into regular church spaces as a, I don't know what you call a parishioner, I guess.
Mhm.
Because that, even that format, that rhythm of
Mhm.
like, come in, do do a worship set, sit down and shut up and listen to the guy up front for a while, do another small set, and leave. Like, my body remembers that. And that
Wow.
my body remembers that so deeply, and that's hard. You
Yeah.
know, I can go into those spaces more easily as a musician, in that, and what I mean by that is like, I can go into those spaces and be like, I'm just here to work. Like, I'm just
Mhm.
here, but like to engage with them and stuff, I'm just like as a follower of Jesus, I'm just like, I cannot right now. You know, and instead, liturgical spaces are easier, I think, for me because they still have a an aspect that I didn't grow up with. So it's not, I don't have this physical memory in
Yeah.
my body like I do with others. And then honestly, our brunch family is like the best one for me because um because getting to hear from everyone at the table
Mhm.
is just a value that I have taken on and a value I hope I keep, you know,
Yes.
for my life, you know,
Yeah.
that that everybody gets heard. So,
Something that I really love about you, Ro, is that you're a very honest person. You're honest about process. You're honest about what you're feeling in your body. You're honest about what you think is whack. You're honest about what you think really deserves more attention and scrutiny, and also just like, you know, people investing in learning things. So I know that this topic of evangelicalism proper, just
yeah.
what is it? That's why I wanted to talk to you about it, because I think that my hope is that after reading the book, if people haven't read the book and they're jumping in at the podcast, hopefully listening to the podcast and listening to all these stories, that people begin to feel at least a little bit of permission to begin to think critically and leave toxic Christianity, knowing that doing that doesn't mean you have to give up Jesus. So when I was thinking about what to talk to you about, talking about the exclusivity, and you mentioned that you were bowing to this exclusivity. I'd love to talk a little bit more about some of the ways that evangelicalism can kind of turn you, actually kind of turn you against yourself, right? Not only just people who are not saved or not Christian, but ways that evangelicalism has really become harmful. And so let's talk about it. A little bit of the history, real quick, of evangelicalism is that it started around the 40s and 50s. It came on the heels of kind of all of the revivals that preceded it. And the thing about it was that it was kind of a change in the culture of fundamentalism. So it was kind of the moderate fundamentalists became the evangelicals. In the 70s, late 60s, early 70s, those folks who were kind of in that space began to take on more of a political view, because they wanted folks like Nixon, Reagan to be elected. And so they began to take on a lot more political conversation. The leaven of whiteness, I think, really began to increase during that season. But there are still some core tenets to evangelicalism, which are biblicism, which means that we hold the Bible as the authoritative, inspired, inerrant, infallible word of God. There is the fact that we believe in conversion. So we believe that a person must have an actual conversion experience. Maybe there's difference in terms of like whether or not a person is baptized, but they definitely need to talk about a conversion from going from death to life. They believe in obviously the personal salvation of Jesus, that Jesus is needs to be known for you as your personal savior. And then they say they believe in works of justice, right? Which is typically prayer and evangelism. It's not usually social justice work. And so that's a little bit about the core tenets of evangelicalism. But what you said that I want you to go deeper into was you entered in because you love Jesus and you were fed a lot of culture. So talk to me about that. What kind of culture would you say describes evangelicalism?
Yeah, the immediate thing that comes to mind for the culture of evangelicalism, and I'm using that really broadly, by the way, because like when I was a kid, we actually went to a church that had evangelicalism in the title, but even like, yeah, as a denomination. But I think even my charismatic experiences absolutely fall within that
Oh,
evangelical
absolutely.
reign, you know, or yeah, room.
Yes.
So the immediate thing that comes to mind is that is surrounded around what questions you have. And
Mm,
like First of all, everything has an answer. Everything has an answer, and there's a right answer for everything. And it's usually someone who's in leadership's answer, you know? So, like, so Jesus is allowed to speak to you, but, you know, you better make sure what he's saying is lining up with the man up front, you know? Like, and if not, you might be worshiping a false idol. And and I hope the way I said that is clear that I'm joking and that I don't believe that. So the idea that there are good questions and bad questions, and
Mm,
also within questions, something I often reflect on is how the word and idea of faith was weaponized as a
mm,
silencing tool. Like if somebody didn't have a question for you, you just had to take it on faith that whatever their answer was, or that there wasn't an answer, that, well, don't worry about it. Just take it on faith. Take what on faith? I don't have anything to take on faith. You didn't say anything. Like, you kidding me? Like,
right.
I don't I'm happy to take faith, like, sure.
Yeah.
But like that is not what I think faith is.
Right.
First of all. So that is immediately what I think of when I think of evangelicalism and the culture is, you know, you better ask the right questions and you better be satisfied with the answers you're given
Mhm.
and don't ask for more.
Right. And I hear you on that faith thing. It's like, if something doesn't make common sense, right? Like if you can't see how a loving God would do A, B, and C, take it on faith. If you can't see how it makes no sense for the pastor to say to you, don't take my word for it, you go read the Bible yourself. And what God tells you, you go with that. So you go with that. But now you're in a call, you're in a Starbucks meeting, you're off the leadership team because you went and you looked at it for yourself and you don't agree with what the pastor is saying. So there are clear ways in which they really do kind of gaslight, in the sense of, they say that you have all of this freedom, but when you exercise that freedom, you find out very quickly you're not that free. Like you're
Yeah.
not free enough to do that.
Yeah.
And so I love that you're pointing that out, because one of the main things that has to go is that fear of what people will think about my faith, like my faithfulness, my seriousness about God. That's the one thing that's the hardest, because it in some way, the way that this thing is designed, it really does include a lot of thought policing and a lot of fear mongering. And you know that if you change your mind about something, or change the way that you view something, or you even stop believing something, you find out very quickly that this place, we don't allow free thought. We do not allow critical thinking, and we do not allow even disagreement on points.
Oh
And
yeah.
I found that even in our community, you wouldn't even know who agreed or disagreed, because the conversation is so robust that we all agree on one thing, that Jesus is beautiful. We want to follow him. We're all wounded and hurting from the toxicity, and we want to care for one another. And so when that's on the table, the diversity is just beautiful. You're not picking sides or teams. You're really fellowshipping with people who are not like you. I love that you brought that out. When you think about kind of the Bible, how the Bible plays a role in this, what
Yeah.
are your thoughts on that? What's your relationship now with the Bible?
So um I think I'm gonna dissect what you said there.
Yeah.
So how does the Bible play into that? I think it's weaponized. You know, I think what evangelicalism does is it takes all these things that Creator meant for us to go on a journey with, to to know him better and to like lead us into maturity, and they use it to deal death, whether that's intellectual death or
Mm,
emotional death or literal bodily death. You know, like it's all there and it has all been used, and it is undeniable. Like anybody who's sitting there saying that, it's like It's not that I don't agree with you. It's actually one of the things I would stand up and say, like, no, that is a fact, and you're actually wrong about that. Like, that's not up for interpretation, you know, because I do believe there are some things that are still just outright like black and white, you know, the dignity of people,
Mhm.
you must be for it. You
Right.
have to. So the Bible, I think, is weaponized. Now, my current relationship with the Bible, I would say, is I want to say difficult, and what I don't mean by that is like it's hard to read. I mean, it's like I know some people are just like I can't pick up a Bible, and I get it. And I'm like, honestly, I'm okay with it. It does not bother me. It
Yeah.
does not bother me. Um I can pick up a Bible, and the difficult aspect of it for me is that I there are still parts where I cannot get out of the ruts that have been formed into my brain as far as interpretation. And I'm going like, I can feel that there's another way, and so that gives me hope. And but the sad part is I'm just like, oh, what is it? What is it, you know? And so just continuing on that journey. And actually, I would say, I mean, if speaking to the in between there, as far as like, I think it was for me starting to listen to other voices on the Bible that really started unraveling leaven, you know, in my life. And I know that's true for other people. Finding out that like penal substitutionary atonement was not the only interpretation
Right.
of all that, you know, coming off of, you know, a major Christian holiday, Easter, and that wasn't
Yes.
the only way and stuff. And I don't know, I actually had two examples of things that I was thinking of when we were kind of going into this that have like really helped me bring what I would say is genuine faith to the Bible, meaning I know there's goodness here and I know I will find it. And the first one um, was um, was on a Rob Bell podcast.
Okay.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, where he would, I can't even remember what series it's in because sometimes he does these series. I'm sure it's probably in one of those because I mean, nobody loves series like an ex-evangelical. Can I just say,
I know that.
like, I love it. Like, I'm like, yes, give me it all.
You love
Probably the
it.
teacher point in me as well. This is probably the teacher in me as well. I want the whole. I want one subject in depth, and then we can move on. Yeah.
Exactly. I'm with
Um,
you.
but he was talking about in Exodus where the command is, do not take the name of the Lord your God in vain. And he was like, the word that's like take, people think that's about swearing or cussing or whatever. And he pointed out that that word actually is interpreted as carry. And that meant what he's doing there is he's giving them a life instruction, not a verbal instruction. He's saying, remember who you are. Remember that you are my chosen people. I have brought you out of slavery. You are carrying the name of Yahweh who hears the cries of the oppressed. Don't you ever forget it, you know? And then people are like, stop swearing. And I'm like, I I can't get behind it. You know what I mean? Like I'm just like there's to me one of those has so much more richness in it, you know, and has so much more of the heart of God in it, you know. And then the other thing is from another podcast where they're that I've been listening to, recommended by our brunch friend Tabitha, and my cousin who's so it's like they both recommended it to me in the span of a week, and I was like, I should go check this out. Um, but they were talking about the story of the flood in Genesis, and it was the first time I heard how like that story was not just a story. Like again, I'm gonna get the details wrong, so please everybody go go dig this up for yourself. I'm not an authority on this. But the whole point of that story was that all Mesopotamian cultures had a story of a flood, and specifically the story of Gilgamesh. And if I'm remembering correctly, Gilgamesh saves the world at like against the will of the gods. And the Hebrew interpretation of that story is actually like showing like, no, God saves the world. Like this God is not like the other gods. Like the story, like all these things is like all of Genesis, which I think is so much better and so much more intellectually rich, is not going, here is a science textbook for you, and here is a history textbook for you. It's going, here's a story of a people and a God who will take a hell of a long time to unravel what they think about him, to show who he really is, and he is good.
Yes, God
So,
is right. That's the first thing about love.
yeah.
Patient. And so when you think about 1 Corinthians 13 and you go, love is patient, love is kind, it does not envy, it does not boast, it doesn't keep a record of wrongs, and then you go, it hopes all things, believes all things, it never fails. You've got to go, if God is love, then in that passage, God is before every adjective. God is patient. God is kind. God does not envy. God does not boast.
Yeah.
That's a very different God than I was given in evangelicalism, right? Yeah. Better hurry up and get saved before the rapture, right? Like, well, God doesn't, God loves everyone, but not everybody is God's child, right? Like there were all of these caveats on love. And to me, it's so beautiful that you brought that up, because that is taking the name of God in vain.
Yeah. Yes.
Do not take my name. What's happening in the wilderness is a betrothal. They're getting God's name. And so God is saying, this is what I'm like. And the hospitality that you're receiving from me in this wilderness, that is what I want you to take to the nations, right? And we take that and we make it about 10 commandments on some tablets that now we can use to draw lines in the sand about who is in and who is out. And what that does, centuries later, here we are, right? And so I love that you're bringing these things out. I mean, I know that Rob Bell was one of the few white men that was on my naughty list.
Yeah.
I think Ends is incredible. He does a great job in helping us reframe the Bible. And the thing that evangelicals have done is they have really villainized the people that will keep you in love with Scripture, actually. Yes. Yes. And I find that is probably the most tragic thing about some of the thought policing, is that, Pete Enns, Rob Bell, Walter Brueggemann, even Jared Bias. There are some white men out here, even Brian McLaurin, even though people don't like him. But Dominic Crossan, there are some white men out here, and Richard Rohr, people hate that guy, who are doing so much to keep people who have fallen in love with Jesus, who receive life from the Scriptures. They have given their lives to being ostracized by the white evangelical community to say the Bible is rich. It may not be inerrant, but that doesn't mean it's not inspired. It may not have, all the history and science lessons that we need, but man, the meaning behind these stories is transcendent. Yeah. And so for me, the Bible has become so much more just lush and, filled with life and things teeming from it, because I'm allowed to read it the way it was supposed to be read, which is this library of individual people or groups of people in hindsight, remembering how God was with them. And this is the story the way I remember it. And there's other people who are writing I wish this is what God would have done, And so if we can just read it like that, it becomes such a beautiful ancient text that God whispers through, but it opens up again to this exclusivity it opens up the possibility that God could have spoken in various times, in various ways to different communities, right? So it opens up the possibility to find God's word and to find divine scripture in all these other places, because the Bible is not this weaponized tool that contains this like very stringent rule book of basic instructions before leaving Earth, right? So I'm hearing you on that, and I love that you're bringing that out, because I think that's the main thing that separates evangelicals, right? Is the way that they think about the Bible and the way that they use the Bible. For you, as you're thinking about like your own healing and your own kind of walking out of an unleavened faith, like what does that look like for you now?
Oh, such a good question. Um, feel like the first step in all of it is um therapy.
Mm.
Like, honestly, like
Yes.
like it is therapy because I think and I um I was really fortunate enough, again, like talk about timing. Um in August of 2019, I'd gone to a um basically a trauma workshop. It wasn't it was labeled not quite like that, but it's really what it was. I mean, everybody who went to it knew what they were doing, and what I learned from there. And I actually had then found a practitioner there who then helped me. We continued to work together through the start of the pandemic, through the 2020 election, you know what I mean, through that really crucial time, right up into finding the inverse and brunch community, was that, like, your story is valid,
Mm.
you know and so the one of the things I think evangelicalism forces us into is emotional dishonesty. And therapy will, when done well, at least the kind of therapy I like, is one that actually doesn't put limits on your feelings. You know what I mean? And actually says, like you're allowed to feel all of this, and there's a reason you feel all of this, and it's good that you're feeling all of this, because I think what we often have to do in evangelicalism is atrophy that part of ourselves and superimpose someone else's feelings on top of it. And when you're doing that, you're just cutting off, you're just cutting off everything inside of you. Like, there's no ability to, like, how can you connect in worship with a God who you won't even tell that you're angry at? Like, you won't even have an honest relationship with, you know? And um yeah, so so finding that, like, stories are valid. And oh shoot, I was gonna say something else tonight about that specific therapy. Oh, so, like, something that has come out of that for me then, and I even use it in my teaching a lot, or I try to, you work with students, and no matter the age, you tell them they have to do things they don't like to do. And I don't know about you, but in evangelicalism, obedience was a whole big deal. And obedience came with an emotional demand.
Come on, talk about
Like, because I wish I'd looked this scripture up beforehand, but there's the parable about, like, like, do, two sons who, like, one says he's going to do it and doesn't do it, and the other one says he's not going to do it and does. And it's like, I wish you would have just done it, like, kind of thing. And so, like, a lot of times when especially because I work with kids a lot, and they say, I don't want to do it. And I always tell them, because this is, I may change this. It's possible, we're all learning and growing all the time.
yeah.
But this is what I have landed on right now, is I always tell kids, I'm like, you don't have to like it. You just have to do it. You can hate this, but I still need you to do it.
Mhm.
Like, and that's just my own best contribution I can give right now to allowing kids to like be emotionally honest with themselves and with me, and to be like, hey, you can be angry, and I'm not gonna, not that I'm not gonna take that on, but like I'm gonna be able to have containment over that. Like I can handle it, you
Mm,
know, because I think that's something that, again, evangelicalism is, because when you're being led by people who've atrophied their own hearts, they don't have room for yours. You know? So you don't have, you can't be honest with them, you know? Um, and if you are, then you, that comes with some losses, you know, suddenly, like you were saying, suddenly it's like, oh, I might not let her do that now. She might be dangerous.
mhm.
She had like, I can't remember. There's where it's just like, oh, she's got thoughts. I don't know if we like those thoughts, you know? And you're just like, well, sorry for being human. I can't help it.
Gosh, cutting room floor. So I did not put this in the book, but I wanted to so bad. I still have it written.
Yeah.
I remember when I first arrived at this large ministry in the Midwest,
Mm.
and I was an intern.
Mm.
There was a guy out there, shout out to Matt Harkey, I'm just gonna say his name, who was challenging some of the reading of some of the texts. And a lot of the texts were eschatological, right? And so Matt Harkey is sitting out here, and it was like kind of, we had this like outdoor seating area, and there were a little bit of people around him. And I remember I was walking with my leader, and we were going to the like prayer room, and she says to me, watch out for that guy, he's dangerous. I just arrived, I don't even know what this guy is talking about. Watch out for that guy, he's dangerous. And I remember when I left evangelicalism, I emailed Matt and I said, you know, he's now an atheist, which I don't blame him, because there was no space for his question.
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah.
but I remember I emailed him and said, hey, I just remember being really interested in what you were saying and never taking the time to honor the fact that you were questioning what you were hearing, and you were inviting other people to do that and saying that it was okay. And it was a really beautiful conversation and exchange we had years later, because I never sat down and listened. I mean, I was warned.
Yeah.
And now I know he was asking really legitimate questions about a lot of stuff. And so I think about that. I love that you point that out, because again, it's not wrong to have your own thoughts. I do love having community, but you know what's funny is that even in our community, our stories sharpen one another, right? So if there are even ways that we think about, let's use our communion example, and the ways that we did the language there, right? We, you know, Tabitha led us in communion,
Yeah.
and a couple of us were like, hey, that's kind of a triggering phrase. Like, can we talk through what this means? And is there a way to phrase it differently? So you keep the meaning, but you remove the stinging of it, right? And I love that, because the way that we're crafting our liturgy in a way that serves and challenges the diversity at the table.
Yeah.
And I'm just really thankful to have you on, because I think there are ways that you have articulated this process that would be really helpful for folks who are just now starting to ask these questions, who are kind of in that, you know, that space you were in when you're having that trauma response, like, what? This is the twilight zone. Like, what is?
Yeah. For
Like,
sure.
I think that's how I want to leave it in terms of the episode, and ask you the three questions. Obviously, have you back, because you're just a wealth of wisdom. I love your thoughts; they're always welcome. But when you think about what you're bringing from the rubble,
Yeah.
so what are you bringing with you that is worth keeping from the rubble of this faith that has sort of collapsed? So that's the first question. Second question is, what are you binging? So are you reading a book or watching a series, drinking a drink? You know, what are you binging right now? What are you enjoying? And then, you know, what are some words to live by, which I'm excited to make space for, which is why I'm going there now. Because I think you have some really I want you to talk to us like you are talking to people who have their hand on the door, who are ready to leave, what I think of as the Truman Show, just this alternate
Yeah.
homogenous reality of thought and faith and theology, right? So I want you to talk to those people who have their hand on their door, because I want you to say what you think you would have needed to hear when it was time to open the door, the thing that would have gotten you to open it and walk out. Okay, so let's go to number one. What are you bringing from the rubble?
Okay. So I think what I'm bringing from the rubble um is trust, but it doesn't look like what it did in those spaces. Like I think trust looked like silence, and now I think trust for me looks like openness to the story of Christ, and to Christ's story in the world and in me. So I think, for instance, like a lot of what I'm bringing is words that I've been able to, with the Lord and with community, redefine. So like faith, for instance, we talked about faith earlier. Faith to me is not having an answer. Faith is going, I know the one who does. And it's okay if I don't know it right now, and I can keep asking it and I can keep searching for it. So yeah, I would say faith and trust.
What are you binging?
Oh my gosh, I'm totally still binging this show, The Good Place. I can't, I just, ugh. I think I'll be binging it for a while, and I've been binging it like since the pandemic, but like, oh man, I see myself in one of the characters on there in particular. Like, I actually had a moment when I watched one of the episodes in like the last season for when I watched it for the first time, where I like had to pause Netflix because I was sobbing so much, and I was like, I'm that person, that's me. Like I felt so like known and seen, and I was just like, oh my gosh. And especially like that character's journey and stuff. But yeah, so binging The Good Place, and I think like one of my favorite things from undergrad, even being a music major, right? Like, because I was in music school, but at a university. So, like, I loved my philosophy class so much. So, the fact that I get to watch like a network comedy that's talking about like Kierkegaard and like Camus, I'm just like, oh, this is so great. Like, I love it. So, yeah, that's what I'm binging.
Help us get out. Okay,
Yeah.
So words to live by. What do you want people to know?
Yeah, I would say leaving that space is not leaving Jesus. I felt like forever, if I was going to leave, that I was just leaving Jesus. And knowing that like you're going to be okay. Like you're not leaving him, and you don't need walls to find a family, and you don't need um a hierarchy to find the truth. You know,
Let's sit. By this time, people know when the word comes like that and it feels very, very potent. Just take a minute and let it hit. That was very powerful. You don't need walls. You don't need hierarchy or community or truth. Selah. Brandon, I love you so much. I'm so glad we got to do this. Where can people find you?
Oh my gosh, I actually, it might be hard to find me because I'm very private on social media. But if you dig, you can find me. If you dig, you can find me. So I do let people send me messages. I just don't let them see my stuff until I'm like, who are you? So, but you can find me on Instagram mostly. I mean, I still have a Facebook page, but I can't tell you the last time I opened it. It's one of those. But social media, and frankly, you can also find me on Sundays at family brunch. So,
Great.
yeah.
Anything you want to plug?
No, just go support your local arts organization. Buy a ticket to something you wouldn't go to otherwise. Try something new out. See if it fits you, you know.
Great. Love you
Yeah.
so much, friend. Thanks a
Love
million.
you. All right. Bye.